Hello, Ethnic Studies class. It's Kenny Przensky again. And today I'm going to be presenting my infographic on my assigned reading, which was the paper called The Social Construction of Difference and the Arab-American Experience by Louis Kinkar. This is my infographic. You can probably see it above this posting. So I'm going to be reading it and kind of showing you what it looks like as I go along. So, what is this paper all about? Here's my thesis from what I could glean from it. From the onset of the civil rights movement in America through the 21st century, Arabs and Muslims have been systematically racialized and yet denied recognition of their marginalization. Instead, ethnically Arab peoples are officially considered white, yet treated as a racial minority, giving them the double burden, as Louis Kinkar puts it, of being both excluded from whiteness and people of color. So, what are some important words to know about when we're going through this reading? Here's what I identified: phenotype, racialization, whiteness, white as a concept, and the clash of civilizations. So, what is a phenotype? This is the physical traits of a person used by others to ascribe racial identities, i.e., looking Middle Eastern. So for me, my phenotypic traits would be my pale skin, my blonde hair, my blue eyes, and this would inform people looking at me that my racial category is white. This also exists for Arab peoples. This may look like darker skin, olive, tan, brown. This may like brown eyes, kind of a longer nose or a hooked nose, and dark hair. Sometimes Muslim religious traits may be included into this as well. So like headdress, whether it be a hijab or turban, things like that are also included in the Arab phenotypic traits. So we talk about racialization a lot within this work. What is that? This is the process of assigning racial meaning to a group based on phenotypes, stereotypes, and essentialized traits. So this is the process of turning all of those things into a race, a picture of what this race is. Now, what is whiteness? I feel like this is a pretty important concept to talk about within whatever work that we're reading in ethnic studies, because it has kind of a specific definition depending on what we're reading. So within this work, it's defined as the racial category including those who are ethnically Caucasian that make up the dominant racial group in the United States and who benefit historically most from structural racism. So when we're talking about whiteness, we're talking about the dominant group in the United States, the ones who are benefiting most from privilege, the ones who are kind of on top. They are not a racial minority, they are the biggest group, right? Now, lastly, clash of civilizations. This was something that was mentioned a few times within the work. I didn't really know what it was. And I gleaned from context clues partly what it was, but I also did have to look it up, so take that with a grain of salt. But this is the concept, or the thesis, adopted by Western scholars, filmmakers, publishers, media outlets, and government officials that frames Islam and Arab culture at large as inherently opposed to Western civilization. So really popular theory that started gaining a lot of traction, say mid 20th century. That Arab peoples, Muslim peoples are diametrically opposed to Western civilization and capitalism at large. And this has roots in ancient times. Think about Christian wars versus Muslim nations. I would say like Christianity and Islam at large kind of had a, shaky, pretty difficult relationship over time. So that kind of brought it out into this thesis, the clash of civilizations. So what are some of the things that we're talking about that Kinkar identifies as reasons why Arab/Muslim should be considered its own racial category? It's because they are considered collectively responsible for individual or small group crimes. So, violent acts committed by Arab individuals are generalized across their entire population. For example, after the 9/11 attacks, at least 100,000 Arabs and Muslims in the US were victim to government security initiatives, including mass arrests, prolonged detention, wiretapping, and more. And at the time, the government said they were not racially profiling, although they never targeted a different group. When a white person commits similar crimes, this phenomena is not seen. So what Kinkar compares this to within their paper is the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, right? So Japan, as a nation, was at war with the US. Pearl Harbor happened, and after that, the US decided that all Japanese Americans within the country should be held responsible for that crime and put in internment camps. This kind of things happen with racial minorities and not majorities. So it doesn't really make sense that Arab peoples are held collectively responsible, unlike white people, and yet are still considered white. So they are also victim to other forms of racism. I put this under the subtitle stereotyping just for simplicity. So Arab people experience similar forms of racism as other racial minorities, such as stereotyping, exclusion, and targeting. Arab/Muslim countries are overwhelmingly affected by anti-immigration laws, and social and structural forces have created overwhelmingly negative public opinions toward Arab peoples. So I'm thinking about like the 1981 immigration law that strictly targeted political Islam, which the House Judiciary Committee actually admitted within their report. Continually, a poll was taken by Cornell in 2004 and identified that around 50% of all US respondents believed that civil liberties should be curtailed for Muslim Americans. So we see this like overwhelmingly negative reaction towards this identified racial minority, which doesn't make sense if they were actually considered as white within the US. So Kinkar also brings up a counterpoint that a lot of people think about when considering this topic, and it's that Arab peoples within the US still enjoy a decent amount of economic success and power via wealth. So why is this? So initially, Arab immigrants experienced marginal whiteness, allowing them to find economic success and start a strong foundation for later generations. Sorry for my misspeaking. So we see in the 1920s and 1930s, Arab peoples who immigrate to the US are still considered as white, and so they enjoy the privileges that come along with that. They're able to start businesses, they're able to gain good education, and so they start this strong foundation for their communities later on. So we see today, a lot of Arab peoples, or people that are considered to be Arab, enjoy positions of power and wealth, whereas there's also a large subsection of Arab peoples that are poor and underprivileged. So that dichotomy exists because of the history of what happened, in the 1920s and 1930s when Arab immigrants came to the US. And Kinkar really wants to nail in the point that racial categorization is not bound to ethnicity, it is not a relic of the past, and it is not unable to be created in the present. So these racial categories that we see, they're not fixed, right? They're not something that just is. They are socially created, and they can change over time. So as public opinion changes and these negative stereotypes come about, a new racial category may be created, which is the Arab/Muslim category. So even though it might not have been a relevant category, in the earlier 20th century, towards the mid and the later 20th century, it definitely is. So let's get into our broader analysis. How does it kind of connect to some of our other readings? I'm going to read this and then I'll kind of explain it. So Freire would agree in the book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and I mainly use chapter 1, with Freire would agree with Kinkar's assessment of the Arab people not meaningfully being included in the white racial identity due to his definition of oppression and oppressed. As he puts it, any situation in which person A objectively exploits person B or hinders his/her pursuit of self-affirmation as a responsible person is one of oppression. So as whiteness is understood as the dominant force in the US, Arab people cannot be considered within their ranks as they have played the role of person B. So because they have been targeted by the government and public at large due to these negative stereotypes and collective responsibility principles, as we saw, they are victims of oppression and they cannot be included in that dominant oppressive role of person A / whiteness within the nation. Continually, it is the nature of white society to allow the mistreatment and colonization of non-white peoples, but not themselves, as evidenced by the shock and disgust at Hitler's actions. So this is a quote from Cesare, I think it's that, Discourse on Colonialism, this paper. And the quote is, "What he cannot forgive Hitler for is the crime against the white man, and the fact that he applied to Europe colonialist procedures which until then had been reserved exclusively for the Arabs of Algeria, the coolies of India, and the N-words of Africa." So we see that white people or white forces are not able to, I guess, allow colonialist forces against themselves, but do allow for this against other racial minorities. So because this also happens against Arab peoples, are they really in that white category? Kinkar would conclude, no. So what are some questions that I was thinking about as I was reading it? We're gonna put this in further thoughts. First one, because Arab racialization is not predicated strictly on ethnic origin, how would a standard definition of Arab be reached? Because Arab and Muslim are kind of conflated, how are we identifying Arab as a racial minority? Are we allowing other religious groups into that, or what's the deal? I'm not super clear on the process in general, how that's determined, checking a box. Is it up to the individual? That's more of my own confusion. Secondly, what, if any, affirmative action measures would be needed if Arab became a recognized racial category? So now that we've kind of identified that they deserve their own recognized racial category, they deserve to be able to check a box that more accurately defines them instead of checking the box white, which really doesn't. What are the next steps? What are we doing? Should we be taking affirmative action measures, and what kind should we be taking to have a more equitable society and have more an equitable view towards Arab peoples? So that's kind of what I was thinking about. That's my presentation. You can look at my infographic here. Bye.